Speech title: The Taming of the Wild Mind. How School Kills the Fire Within Ladies and Gentlemen, Seekers of Truth and those who dare to question the foundations of their own beliefs. Let us speak today not in soft tones of comfort, but with the sharp edge of thought. We gather not to flatter institutions, but to examine them under the burning light of honesty. Let us speak of school, not the bricks and books, but the idea. Let us speak of how it shapes the child, how it presses upon the soft clay of youth, and what kind of statues it dares to mold from wild, living minds. From earliest age, the child enters not a temple of learning, but a factory of sameness. You are told it is education, but it is more often indoctrination masked as guidance. The child, full of instinct, wonder, and the thundering curiosity of life, is told to sit still, to be quiet, to raise their hand. Before speaking, the wild stallion is tied to a desk, praised for not running, and thus begins the first lie. Obedience is virtue, not courage, not imagination. Obedience. The child who questions too deeply, who asks why the sky is blue and not red, who wonders why rules exist or why certain things are just the way they are. This child is told to calm down, to behave. The school prefers the child who memorizes, not the one who contemplates. It rewards the parrot, not the eagle. In this, the school becomes the first enemy of original thought. It pretends to teach freedom, but it enforces conformity. It praises individuality in its speeches, but in its tests it punishes deviation. Think not differently, but correctly, not deeply, but efficiently. The curriculum becomes a cage. What is taught is not the full scope of human potential, but what is deemed acceptable by those who benefit from obedience. History is trimmed. Science is reduced to facts without wonder. Literature is taught not for its rebellion but for its ability to be analyzed by formula. The student becomes a machine designed to take tests, not a soul awakened to the mystery of existence. And then they dare to speak of morality, of right and wrong, but how is it taught? Through fear, grades, detentions, gold stars, approval and shame. Morality becomes a transaction, not a transformation. A child learns not why to be good, but how to avoid punishment. This is not the cultivation of virtue. It is the training of a pet. And what of the will, that sacred flame in every child? The will to act, to create, to destroy, to rebuild. The school smothers it with a heavy blanket of routine. Bells dictate when to think. Lunch breaks dictate when to feel hunger. Even the joy of discovery is scheduled. Child forgets how to listen to the voice within, for it is drowned in a chorus of external instructions. This, my friends, is the quiet death of the individual. You leave school knowing the capitals of nations, but not the map of your own soul. You are trained to follow paths already paved, never to carve your own. You know how to be employed, but not how to live. How to produce, but not how to create. How to impress, but not how to be free. And still we praise the system. We dress children in uniforms and call it discipline. But what is discipline without purpose? What is education without self-discovery? Is it not better to let a child climb trees and fall than to sit in safety and rot? Is it not better to read one book with fire in the heart than 10 with eyes glazed by boredom? A true education does not tame, it awakens. It does not instruct, it ignites. It does not conform, it liberates. To educate is to draw out, not to shove in. To challenge the child to become not what society needs, but what their spirit demands. But how many dare to teach like this? How many schools are temples of becoming and not prisons of fitting in? The tragedy is not merely that the system fails. The tragedy is that it succeeds at producing generations of well-behaved mediocrities, terrified of being wrong, addicted to approval, allergic to risk, and incapable of thinking thoughts that do not already exist. The wild mind, full of fire, instinct, and the desire to tear through veils of illusion, is slowly, politely, and systematically killed. So I say, let us rethink the very soil in which we plant our children. Let us not teach them to walk in straight lines, but to dance in spirals. Let us encourage not silence, but symphonies. Let us raise questioners, rebels, creators, those who do not fit, but who make the mold itself irrelevant. Only then can we say we have educated. Only then can we say we have not destroyed the mind of the child, but liberated it. The school, from the very beginning, does not seek to nurture the spark of individuality, but to extinguish it. Beneath layers of sameness, a child, born with a wildness in the mind, A raw, beautiful chaos is immediately subjected to rules, systems, and patterns that demand one thing above all else: conformity. This is done not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of unpredictability, fear of the child who refuses to be molded. And so, from the earliest days, the child is taught to color within the lines, to repeat after the teacher, to give the expected answer rather than the true one that might be hiding in their heart. Creativity, which springs from freedom and instinct, is treated with suspicion. If a child's imagination dances too wildly, they are told to focus. If they challenge the rules or suggest another way, they are called a troublemaker. The system does not want questions. It wants quiet compliance. It does not want thinkers. It wants repeaters. The school prefers the child who sits still and absorbs, not the one who moves and explores. This conformity is rewarded with praise, high grades, and approval. The obedient child is elevated as the model, the standard, the one to be copied. The child who resists, who dares to be different, is slowly isolated, corrected, or quietly broken until they, too, bend to the pattern, and what is lost in this process is something irreplaceable: the raw originality of thought, the chaos that gives birth to genius. True creativity is not born in silence and order. It is born in struggle, in conflict, in questioning. But schools fear the messiness of such growth. They prefer a neat garden of trimmed bushes over a wild forest of unpredictable trees. They teach uniformity under the name of unity. They train minds to fear standing out. And so, slowly, the unique voice within each child begins to whisper less. Mind becomes tamed, polished, and shaped not to be itself, but to resemble the others. In doing so, society produces not creators, but conformists, not visionaries, but followers. The fire of the individual mind, once so bright, is dimmed beneath worksheets, tests, and rehearsed answers. The child becomes an adult who no longer knows how to dream, how to doubt, or how to break away from the herd. And in that quiet resignation, the world loses something precious, a soul that might have changed it. This is how the school kills the fire within, not with violence, but with quiet correction, not with chains, but with expectations, not with hatred, but with the persistent demand to be like everyone else. And the tragedy is that we call this success. From the moment a child steps into a classroom, they are not invited to explore the mystery of life. They are told what life is, how it works, and how they should think about it. The questions that once swirled in their young, curious mind begin to fade under the constant repetition of ready-made answers. The institution of school does not cultivate the mind to wonder. It conditions it to accept. Slowly, subtly, the child is trained to absorb information, not interrogate it, to memorize facts, not challenge their meaning. This conditioning begins innocently enough. The child asks, "Why is the sky blue?" Instead of a doorway into awe and discovery, they are given a short, technical answer, neat, efficient, and closed. Over time, the questions grow quieter. The instinct to ask, to doubt, to explore becomes less natural. After all, in school, questions are only welcomed when they fit the lesson plan, when they do not disrupt the flow of authority. To think for oneself becomes an inconvenience, an interruption. This is not education. It is domestication. The tragedy is not that schools fail to answer every question. The tragedy is that they kill the desire to ask in the first place. They reward correct answers over original thought. They prefer a student who gets a perfect score on the test to the one who challenges the very premise of the test. In doing so, they create minds that are filled with knowledge but empty of insight. Learning becomes a game of guessing what the teacher wants to hear. Students learn to parrot information back with precision but without understanding. They learn to perform intelligence without embodying it. To think is no longer a personal act of discovery. It becomes an act of compliance. The mind becomes trained to seek validation rather than truth, and so the school becomes the graveyard of curiosity. The child, once filled with the courage to ask why, or what if, and now fears the silence that follows such questions. They are made to feel foolish for thinking differently. They are taught that doubt is dangerous and that authority is sacred. The system fears the thinker because the thinker cannot be easily controlled. But without questioning, there is no Growth without doubt, there is no truth. To become fully human is to wrestle with the unknown, to tear apart falsehoods, to risk being wrong in pursuit of something greater. Yet schools train students to avoid all of this. They are told what to believe, what is acceptable, what is real. Thought is no longer a weapon, it is a tool for obedience. And in this way, schools do not just fail to nurture the questioning mind, they actively destroy it. What could have been a generation of deep thinkers, wild philosophers, fearless explorers of truth, becomes a generation of trained, well-behaved followers, and in this silence, humanity loses its sharpest instrument, the power to think for itself. In the world of school, mediocrity is not just tolerated, it is quietly celebrated. Excellence, if it exists at all, is carefully redefined. No longer does it mean rising above, creating anew, or defying the norms. It means fitting in with precision, meeting expectations without disturbance, and achieving what others have already approved. The student who conforms perfectly to the grading system, who performs tasks without deviation, who obeys every instruction without hesitation, this is the one who is called excellent. But this is not excellence. It is perfection in mediocrity. In this system, students are not challenged to become who they are meant to be. Instead, they are measured by how well they resemble everyone else. They are tested on how efficiently they remember what they have been told, not how deeply they understand it or how courageously they question it. The one who dares to express a different answer, even if it comes from truth, is penalized. The one who colors outside the lines is corrected. The one who doesn't follow the script is deemed a failure. And so the path to success in school is paved with quiet compromise. This quiet compromise becomes the standard. Over time, students learn not to aim for greatness, but for approval. They stop reaching for something higher and instead aim for what is safe, what will earn applause. They do not chase the unknown or the impossible. They chase the applause, the certificate, the praise, and in chasing these symbols, they forget to chase themselves. The tragedy is not simply that schools lower the bar. It's that they convince students that this bar is the highest that can be reached, that being average in everything is somehow more desirable than being exceptional in one thing, that being consistent and compliant is more important than being passionate and unpredictable. True excellence is dangerous to the system. It disrupts, it challenges, it refuses to be boxed. It makes others uncomfortable because it cannot be explained with a rubric. And so the system trims it down. It smooths the edges, files down the points, and presents us with students who succeed by doing exactly what is expected. Never more, never less. By the time these students graduate, they have learned not how to excel, but how to maintain. They have become masters of the average, experts in repetition, and society welcomes them, not as leaders, not as visionaries, but as dependable gears in the machine. But what if a child had been encouraged to pursue their madness? What if they had been allowed to dig deeply into their obsession, even if it made no sense to anyone else? What if the system had nurtured their flame instead of smothering it with standards? Then we might have had fewer obedient professionals and more dangerous thinkers, more true creators. Instead, we are left with generations that mistake conformity for excellence. They shine brightly on the outside, but are dim within. The world is full of them, polished, accomplished, and utterly forgettable. Schools teach morality, but not through wisdom, understanding, or inner awakening. Instead, they build it on the crude architecture of fear and reward. From the earliest days, a child learns that to be good means to avoid punishment and to seek approval. To follow the rules is not an act of ethical reflection. It is a strategy for survival. The child learns not why something is right or wrong, but that being caught doing the wrong thing brings consequences. The lesson is simple: avoid discomfort, pursue praise. This is not moral development, it is behavioral conditioning. When a child acts kindly, they are given a gold star. When they speak out of turn, they lose privileges. Their actions are judged not by intention or inner values, but by whether they fit into the teacher's system of control. As a result, the student learns to behave in a way that pleases authority, rather than a way that reflects truth. They may appear polite and obedient, but inside there is no rooted understanding of justice, compassion, or responsibility. There is only calculation. This calculation follows them into adulthood. They become people who avoid doing wrong, not because they believe it is wrong, but because they fear the consequences. They learn to smile at others, not from love or respect, but because it is expected. Morality becomes a performance, empty, robotic, and dictated by fear. The school, in its obsession with order and control, misses the point entirely. It suppresses the chaos of moral struggle, the honest battle between desire and principle, between impulse and understanding. A true moral compass is forged in the fire of inner questioning, of facing consequences not just outside but within. But in school, the only consequence that matters is external. Moreover, the rules imposed are often arbitrary and designed for convenience, not for truth. Do not speak unless called upon. Do not challenge the lesson. Line up in silence. These are not moral teachings. They are methods of obedience, yet they are enforced with moral authority. The student who breaks these rules is not merely corrected. They are labeled disrespectful, disruptive, bad. In this way, the very idea of right and wrong is distorted. Obedience becomes synonymous with virtue. Resistance, even when guided by honesty or curiosity, becomes synonymous with sin. In such an environment, a truly moral child, the one who questions unfairness, who refuses to stay silent in the face of injustice, who follows an inner voice instead of an external rule, is often punished. They are taught to distrust their conscience, to replace it with compliance. The school does not raise ethical beings. It raises those who know how to avoid punishment, and so generations grow up confused. They know how to behave but not how to be good. They know how to follow rules but not how to live with integrity. Their morality is fragile, dependent on whether someone is watching, and when no one is watching, it vanishes. This is the failure, not just of education, but of conscience. In the structure of school, the child's natural instincts are not guided or refined. They are systematically suppressed. From the moment they enter the classroom, they are taught to look outward for validation and direction. The inner voice, once loud and alive, is gradually ignored, silenced beneath layers of rules, expectations, and external judgment. The child learns that what matters is not how they feel, not what they sense or desire, but how they appear in the eyes of others. Approval becomes the measure of worth. Grades become the measure of intelligence. Praise becomes the substitute for inner fulfillment. In this environment, the individual will, the deep, mysterious force that drives a person to create, to rebel, to love, to imagine, begins to atrophy. The child becomes increasingly dependent on external systems to tell them who they are and what they should become. Instead of being led by instinct, they are managed by schedules. Instead of listening to their own curiosities, they are fed a standardized curriculum. Day after day, they are told what is important, what to focus on, and when to stop thinking about it. This process does not build character, it hollows it out. The child, once alive with raw potential, becomes passive. They wait to be told what to do. They wait for the bell to move, the teacher to speak, the grade to tell them their worth. The will, the inner engine of becoming, is no longer trusted, it is feared. Because when the will is alive, it is unpredictable. It questions authority. It creates things that don't fit the rubric. It seeks truth over approval. But the school does not know what to do with such freedom, so it replaces it with structure. It rewards those who conform, who wait, who never act until they are told to. These students are labeled well-behaved, but in truth they are only well-managed. By the time they leave school, many young people no longer know what they want, not because they never had desires, but because those desires were never allowed to grow. They are trained to chase titles, positions, and social approval, not because these things fulfill them, but because they were conditioned to believe that success lies in being chosen, not in choosing. The loss is not only personal, it is collective. A society filled with people who do not trust their own will is a society that does not innovate, does not challenge injustice, does not dream beyond its structures. It becomes stagnant, safe, and shallow. And yet, within each child, the will still flickers, even if faintly. It waits to be remembered, to be listened to again. True education would nourish that flame, would teach the child to trust it, to refine it, to follow it into the unknown. But until the system changes, the will shall remain buried under diplomas and report cards, quiet, obedient, and dying slowly. Conclusion of the speech, The Taming of the Wild Mind, How School Kills the Fire Within. We were told that school would be the place where our minds awaken, where our purpose is revealed, and where our spirits are shaped for greatness. But in truth, it has too often become the place where curiosity dies, where imagination is smothered, and where the wild beauty of the human soul is broken into uniform shapes. We have mistaken order for growth, memorization for wisdom, compliance for morality, and performance for purpose. We have raised generations to follow instead of question, to obey instead of create, to seek validation instead of truth. And in doing so, we have lost the very thing that makes a human being powerful, the capacity to think, to feel, to imagine freely and dangerously. The child enters this world as a flame, burning with instinct, with wonder, with a desire to explore, rebel, and become. But the school, instead of feeding that flame, builds walls around it. It tames, it trains, it trims. It rewards obedience and punishes individuality. It calls those who follow smart and those who resist difficult. And so the fire dims, the questions fade, and the child forgets the sound of their own voice. This is not education. This is the quiet destruction of the self. But it is not irreversible. The system is not eternal. It can be challenged, and it must be. We must reimagine education, not as a place of standardization, but as a sanctuary for becoming. We must teach not obedience, but awareness, not fear of being wrong, but the courage to think boldly, not memorization of facts, but the birth of questions. We must raise children not to pass tests, but to pass through life with clarity, purpose, and authenticity. Let the goal of learning be not perfection, but transformation. Let schools become places where the fire of the human spirit is not extinguished, but ignited. To the parents, the teachers, the thinkers, protect the wildness in the child. Defend their right to question, to fail, to dream wildly. And to the young minds still searching for themselves, do not let the system define you. Find your voice, follow your will, trust the fire within. Because true education does not tame, it sets the mind free.